Coming this fall, the story of a grape who refuses to be crushed. One grape to rule them all, and one bottle to...
Whoa, honey, what are you doing?
I was recording an intro.
Okay, that's great, but we got a podcast to do.
Okay.
All right, well, this is We Know Texas Vino.
Well, hey, everybody. We're back here with Will and Erica. We're in a beautiful place called Gunter, Texas for another podcast. How exciting, guys.
Yeah, we're at Square Cloud Winery.
We're going to learn what that means.
Yeah.
We're going to learn here in a while what that means.
We're going to talk about Jackson and about their whole journey. So
yeah.
Jackson
actually,
and Cheryl.
Michael Cook actually suggested us coming here.
Oh, okay. So that was Michael's idea.
Yes.
Oh, well,
yeah,
clever.
not you, Michael, but the other Michael.
the Michael Cook who we're with today. We're excited
Yeah.
to have him here. And I know, Erica, you were going to introduce today and just kind of say some things about today's podcast.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you back, Michael. You have been phenomenal. I've learned a ton.
You're sweet.
Well, it's true.
I only had to pay you off to say that.
Well, I'm
How should
still
you
waiting
pay
for
her?
the check.
What about me?
He
I'll
got
pay
me.
you. I got a dollar bill left. It's Christmas.
Okay.
Michael, don't forget to tell him about the 5 bottles of wine you gave me.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, we're doing part B here because
Yes.
we have a resource like Michael Cook in the house, and we
Absolutely.
can't just leave it, talking about a few things like, hey, where'd you grow up and that sort of thing. This is a vessel. I termed it last episode, a vessel of knowledge. And so we kept them here. We tied them down and said, we must have your information. Oh, I appreciate it.
But
so this is part B of episode 32.
Yeah, and I think it's critical for people who drink Texas wine or starting to learn about Texas wine to understand what it goes into to make this amazing wine that we have here in Texas. I mean, we are starting to overtake awards from California, who has dominated the wine industry for multiple years.
Right.
And now we're starting to win awards over in Europe, from what I understand. And now we're starting to overtake over there. And now, granted, all the wines in Europe is now Texas wines because they do have the root stock.
That's a whole nother episode, my
Thanks
friend.
to TV Munson. So
That's
Mr.
right.
Munson,
So technically, all the wines in the world is actually Texas wine grapes of some sort.
origins, yeah, those fruit stocks. Yeah.
So-
Awesome. Well, let's get some things out of the way here real quick before we re-interview Mr. Michael Cook here real quick. But, we're excited to do episode 33, part B here with this gentleman, and we're going to have a great time. But let's talk real quick. I think we need to showcase our sponsors a little bit more here. We have 3 great sponsors, and I know I'm going to talk about the first one real quick, which we're super proud of, and that's the Texas Wine Lover app and, of course, the website. I think they're kind of going by Texas Wine Friends now as well.
Well,
but
no,
Jeff
the Friends
and
part
Amy,
is a Facebook group name.
Okay, well,
Friends is a Facebook group name.
All right. Well, Jeff and Amy are amazing. Jeff,
Yes.
the Godfather, and I believe Wonder Woman Amy. We're so grateful to have that relationship because, number one, they've really supported us. They've given us a lot of insight, but also a little bit of direction, which is a beautiful thing, almost being mentored by them.
Yep.
But what a great organization. What they've done with their technology is so beneficial to the wine community, to the wine ownership, to get people around. In fact, Erica, just the other day, you were talking to someone,
Sure.
and they were asking, and what'd you
Angela.
say, Angela?
Angela, she goes, how do you figure out where to go to
Yes.
find these wineries and plan your trip? And I go, well, it
Well-
just so happens there's this app.
Oh yeah, and Jeff
Application.
and Amy. I mean, we're all on the rooftop talking about Texas wine and trying to get the word out that we've got a unique product that's Texas grown, Texas made, Texas beautiful, and they're screaming it. And so they're really out there trying to share, our passion and love for wine that's made here in Texas to the Texas public. And so great. Jeff and Amy, they have one of the most extensive as well winery lists with their experiences. And so we actually work with them on trying to gauge numbers through our our crush report. So they wealth of knowledge there.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Well,
Erica, you have another sponsor you want to talk about real quick?
Yeah, the Texas Wine Club is awesome. In fact, when we were on the break, I was asking Michael, how do you deal with people from Texas who say, gosh, I just don't like Texas wines because I like, European wines or wines from California or Oregon or that kind of thing. And they just don't have the experience of the current Texas wine that we have and how much things are moving forward.
In Texas wine, there's been some star examples of fabulous quality wine, even in the 80s, which was pretty much our rebirth. But if you haven't had Texas wine, maybe you had a bad experience or you didn't understand what your preference was with wine. And you go, well, I had a really dry wine and I didn't like it from this Texas winery, but I realized I don't like dry wine, even California dry wine. Get out there. And we were talked earlier, long gone are the days where there wasn't a good Texas winery near you. There's no excuse anymore.
Right.
So re-explore that. It's exciting.
Yes.
When you get to go out and learn the story and chat with all these people here, whether it's tasting room staff or the owners, winemakers, they're here to share their love and their story.
Yep.
And they want to tell you about that.
Well, and that's what Texas Wine Club does, which is so great.
Texas Wine Club, man, that's what they do. That is like they are trying to get the people out there to understand the wine out there from Texas. That's what they're trying to do.
Well, and what's neat about them is they do blind testings, and they say, gosh, we're not going to just accept this wine because it's from Texas. We're going to make sure it meets this criteria, and then we're going to send it out to everybody.
I would say, our industry is growing, not just by number, but in experience, through experimentation, hopefully at least to some degree through education, through, not just through the academic institutions, but also through other avenues. I know a lot of staff are being trained with WSET. They're going, you're enrolled in Grayson College in the V&E program there. And so just trying to learn more, but realizing the textbook hasn't been finished on Texas grape growing and winemaking.
Absolutely.
And so we're in the middle of it. And so there's still a lot out there we don't know, but that's part of the excitement is trudging through the expense of experimentation. Both on the research level through academia in collaboration with our growers, and then just the winemakers and grape growers saying, hey, this year, let's try something different.
Awesome. And Will, you have a third, very exciting new addition to our family. Let's talk about that real quick.
This is probably one of my favorite ones our newest one actually is Fly with Wine. Have you heard?
I haven't heard of them. Tell me about them.
So you ever gone to a winery? We'll say you went to overseas, or you went to France, or even if you went to Washington or Oregon, and you bought wine, and you try to figure out how to ship it back.
Oh yes.
And you figure out that to ship a case of wine, it's going to be very, very expensive.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Fly with Wine has made it easier by actually making a travel suitcase that you can put, depending on what size you buy, you can get, I think, between 3 to a suitcase to bring your wine back where you can check it in. And if I did my math correctly, from what I read, it's actually cheaper to do a check-in bag and pay by the pound.
It is. I'll tell you, where were they back in 2012 when I studied abroad in Italy? The only time I've been abroad, and I said, I can't. This wine, it's the cost of a Coca-Cola. I've got to bring some home.
Right.
And I fit. Guess what? I had a duffel bag, and I fit. Of course, it wasn't just wine. I had 15 bottles of wine, about a gallon of grappa, other liquor, coffee, liqueur, that kind of stuff. I had cheese and bread. Oh, the bread there,
Oh, yeah.
I was like, it's just as good as the
in
wine.
a duffel bag, Michael?
In a duffel bag. And
Oh,
it was
my
all
God.
padded, but where were these guys? I needed their help.
For sure.
So,
I don't know, but I'm borrowing the suitcase. To
Yeah, we have a
visit my
suitcase coming
mom.
up pretty soon. We're heading over to Washington.
and and olive oil too, and not a single thing broke.
That's impressive
Yeah.
in a duffel bag.
It's just amazing. They sent us one, and I'm really grateful for them of that. And they even put our name on it. So it says,
that
"We know
is-
Texas Vito" on it.
Well, I
That's
love
more
reading the
than
quote.
convenient.
Solving wine shipping problems and dilemmas.
Yes.
I love that. Isn't that beautiful?
Well, I mean,
So-
just be able to solve a dilemma for shipping your
Absolutely.
wine, because I mean that's plain and simple, right
Well, let's
there.
get into this part B, episode 33, and you can find us everywhere on social networking platforms, of course. With, everywhere. We're everywhere now, and thanks to you, the new website with his we know TexasVino.wine.
Well, I will make one more little quick statement. You're talking about the Texas wine, getting it out there. Do you know our podcast is heard around the world?
I believe it.
So
Now, I don't know if they've seen your face, but not only are y'all excellent radio personalities, you're good looking too.
Oh, my goodness.
I can't imagine people not liking y'all.
Erica, we're taking Michael home with us.
He wants that wine
Yes.
suitcase.
he has a place to stay forever over in Corinth,
man.
Texas. So that's a beautiful thing. Well, good. Well, let's get after it. So today's episode, I'm
Yes.
actually kind of excited about today's episode because part A was just who is this character that everyone's talking about, Michael Cook, and we've
Fascinating.
learned a lot about it. And
Yes.
I think we can all agree that there's going to be multiple, as long as Michael Cook is all about it, there's going to be multiple opportunities to connect with Michael Cook and talk about different subjects for the next year or 2 or 3 years. And it's going to be really fun getting to know you better. And we really are here to serve you and everything you're doing here in the state of Texas. But today's episode is more about education.
Yeah.
And we have a couple topics that we're going to really address today. I think how cool is it, Will and Erica, that we have Michael Cook here,
Absolutely.
who probably is, if not the authority on this. I mean, he's got to be one of the, and Michael, don't be modest. I mean,
I appreciate that, but yeah, it's a team effort. But yeah, so
but
I'm fortunate
you have
to work
mentorship.
with-
You have
Yes.
mentorship. You have
Yes.
people you work with,
Absolutely.
colleagues who are just equally passionate, of course. but you have been well educated. And it's just talking to you. I'm just Eric and I know we grew up in the academia world a little bit. I'm sure Will did too, but I can only speak for Eric and me. We thrive in that environment. We want to learn it. It's a continual thing. I can tell you also have that passion to continually learn.
Absolutely.
Well, good. Well, we're going to talk about some subjects today, and this is the man.
Yeah. So let's start from the bottom and work our way up.
Work our way up.
How's that sound?
You want to do that real quick?
Yeah.
That sounds logical.
So we're going to start with the soil. Okay. So let's migrate. We're going to start with the soil.
So you mean not from the bottom up, from the ground up.
Oh, from the ground up,
or we could say from the rhizosphere up.
Oh, okay.
Michael's also a poet and a philosopher.
Exactly.
So yes, he's got a lot going on here.
So let's start with soil, and let's end with weather.
Okay.
So let's talk about the soil, and I know you can go in very deep on all of this, and so let's get deep, but not too deep.
I'll give you the Aggie version.
You want to get deep in the soil, but not too deep.
Yeah, we don't look at Derek
I'm
over there.
impressed you didn't call it dirt. So that's one of the big no-nos in horticulture. Just like the word variety and varietal that gets misused in I'm not talking Texas, of course, but across the world, but soil versus dirt. So you said soil. I'm already impressed.
Yeah. So let's do that, and we'll go ahead and talk about the vines and building the trellises out, and then a little bit of the water, and then let's hit with weather, because we know we had this like hell on earth here.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and with that, and then talk maybe about some of the different diseases briefly that is affecting maybe North Texas right now.
So you're here for another 3 hours. Saddle in.
I'm here. I got nowhere to be. I went to church this morning, so I got the rest of the day.
Yahoo.
All right. So take it away. It's all yours now.
First, I want to again thank you all for your dedication to the wine industry and getting that story out there. We all have a story, and we can all learn from each other. And also, as people who grow an agricultural crop, it can be very daunting initially, and it can be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, hey, it was hard the first couple years. We got the vineyard going. Now we're on easy street. A lot of people who start a vineyard or winery in Texas, if they don't have an ag background, a lot of times, and I don't fault them for this, but it initially there's that excitement within, and a lot of that is around romanticism. Right? You go to Tuscany, which I've been to once, and you fall in love, and hey, this 90-year-old grandma out there is tending an acre of grapes and making fabulous wine. Can I not do that? And so we start from the ground up, and you go, what commonalities do we have as far as our soils and our climate and our other production requirements for growing grapes in Texas, but what sets us apart? And so, we've got grapes being grown. We have grapes being grown across the entire United States. And we can kind of split the U.S. up into kind of the East Coast, which is warm and humid, but they get a lot of rainfall, and they can have extremely brutally cold winters. And then you've got the West Coast, which is pretty much heaven on earth. Mm-hmm. And they have their challenges. Of course, they would definitely disagree that it was heaven on earth all the time. And they're facing things like drought, historic drought and heat waves. But where are we? Smack dab in the dang middle. And so we get everything.
Yes.
And so Texas is unique because we span the, essentially the hot and humid Northeast. And then as you move towards Lubbock, you're getting into more of what we would call the Southwest. And so the first thing I'll say is we can generalize on what makes great Texas wine, but we're proud that Texas is big, right? And so depending on where you are, what you're going to grow, how you're going to grow it, the risk and reward is going to be different.
Right.
And so that's the first thing. Y'all know Texas is big, so there's going to be differences in soil. We have over 1,300 different types of soil.
Wow.
1,300?
1,300.
Wow.
So we think of clay, we think of sand, we think of silt or loam. We have that, but there's combinations. So 1,300 combinations of those, essentially, plus chemistry and structure. Mm-hmm. And so you combine that, and how in the heck are you going to be able to write a book that says, if you're in this area, your soil is going to help in this way? So we generalize, and with A&M, we do a lot of research with how can we promote a healthy soil, because if the soil is healthy, the bank, the nutrient, the water bank, the foundation of our vines, mm-hmm. if that's healthy, or at least healthier than it was before, being good stewards, then that's going to help that mother vine to be able to withstand and buffer at least some of the maybe climatic issues we have, like cold, Winter Storm Uri, mm-hmm. Drought, flood, whatever, hurricanes. Hurricane Harvey caused major issues
Yep.
in the Gulf Coast. And so we start with the ground, and we know the soil does what, right? It anchors the plant. The plant can't walk away, and so it's stuck there. And it has roots that anchor itself, and those roots take up water. All right. Well, how much water? That's another topic for another time. But one of our challenges with 1,300 different types of soils or soil series, some soils inherently want to hold more water after a rain or irrigation event. Some won't hold barely any. It'll drain immediately away, like a sugar sand, versus a heavy clay like we're here in Gunter near Dallas, Fort Worth. And this country is blackland clay. You walk out in that field and you walk back out and you've got 10 pounds of soil on your foot, on each foot, right? So that's a sticky, shrink, swell clay. That's very difficult to grow grapevines. Grapevines are tough, though, once they're established, if you're planting a well-adapted variety for that area. So we start with the soil. Of course, water's a big thing. And so we've got some soils that hold a good amount of water sometimes, and maybe too much water other times. When we get a lot of rainfall, other soils don't hold enough. They can barely hold water. It stays in there for a little bit, and then the plant available water is gone. So sand. So we've got that. We've also got chemistry. So I talked about texture, right? The feel, right? The particulate size, sand, silt, and clay. Grapes typically can grow in any of those, but the ideal texture is going to be more of a loam. You get the best of both worlds. A clay that can hold more nutrients because of what we call its cation exchange capacity, or its ability to attract positively charged ions, which a lot of our fertilizers are, except dang nitrogen. And also, where was I going with that? I thought that little quip at the end was good, and I just lost my train of thought.
But maybe just the soil, the different varieties of soils and the clay.
But it can also hold water, and so that's good, because if the soil can hold more water, that's less we have to apply in general. However, there's a caveat to that. Some soils can hold too much water for too long of time, and y'all probably experience this in your backyards. When you get a rain and that soil is mush and it's starting to stink, and it won't drain for 2 weeks. So there's leeway with grapes, but we want to do everything we can to relieve the stress that mother vine may encounter. And so soil texture is a big thing, making sure we have good internal soil drainage, but enough water holding capacity. So that's one aspect. Nutrition I talked about. We can apply both conventional and organic fertilizers. The plant doesn't know the difference. The key is going to be how and when they're available. We won't talk in detail there, but we have to keep that in mind. What does the bank have in the soil as far as nutrition? Those are the deposits that are made by us and debris, cover crop, and what the vine takes out. Okay, so we've got that, and we've got also chemistry, which that does include nutrients. But what do you think when you think about soil chemistry? What's one of the big things? Just like when we talk about wine, that's pH.
Okay,
and so 1,300 different soil series in Texas. Do you think we all have the same pH?
Nope.
Not even in the same county. We can have acidic soil, alkaline soil in the same county. And we see that especially in North Texas. It's highly it's not homogeneous. So it's heterogeneous. What is the word there?
That's the other word.
Yeah.
So I forget that. I haven't had to say that word in a long time.
That's all right.
Well, it's when you talk about the soil and just you can go from one part of the town to the next.
Yeah.
You don't even have to go county, so you can just go a couple of feet.
And not even just county, but if you're a vineyard that's more than maybe half an acre, it may be in the same block. And that's what we call that's a big part of what we call precision viticulture. Y'all may have heard that term. It's a buzzword out there, and it's been a buzzword for many years. But it's how can we understand our site better, the heterogeneity, and be smarter about this? Because if you've got a block that has maybe it's predominantly clay, and you're going to manage it a certain way, but you've got this strip of sand, those vines are not going to respond as well to those management strategies for clay. And so precision viticulture looks at many aspects of technology, but how can we isolate these and provide different management strategies to them? A lot of that's done through mechanization and AI nowadays, at least on large scale, like in California. So we're really interested in that. But you're right. I mean, the soil plays a huge role in how the mother vine is going to grow and resist stress. And so in Texas, it's all about stress. And every Texan understands the word stress. If they're new, if you're one of those Californians that moved to Texas, this year you've understood the word stress.
I don't think stress is actually the key word. I think it's death.
Well,
Some people, yes. For me, it certainly was death. And you know what the worst part of it was? In Extension, I'm outside all day long in vineyards, working with our tough growers. Tough as in they're the ones that are really resilient because they're out there 24 hours a day. But I'm out there and I sweat like a horse and I could barely survive. And did I lose a single pound? I thought I would have lost weight.
Nope.
And I didn't.
Did you enjoy a glass of wine afterwards?
Yeah, now that's the problem is because the grape grower is like, all right, here's a Gatorade and let's go inside and have some wine and some barbecue. But
man,
you're
never gonna lose weight like that.
I know. I was like, man, the one, when it's this hot and I'm sweating, I'm like, I'd expect to burn some calories and lose some weight. And that did not
Who
work
needs
out.
a sauna when you have your outdoor sauna?
Yeah. So it's just like trying to get out there and sweat and rehydrate, but not my crux is eating at night, right? Having a glass of wine with some charcuterie, cheese, and meat and all that.
So that right there,
that's my crux. But yeah, so soil plays a huge role. So it's very complicated. I'm not a soil scientist. We've got lots of experts in that field, but as a viticulturist, even if you're a backyard grape grower, you got to have a key foundation in soil if you want to be sustainable and successful long term. Because most of the activity happens in the soil. Now, y'all know I'm a PhD student in addition to being a full-time extension program specialist. And I took an exciting course last semester, and it was called Plant-Associated Microbes. And that class, that's a new science, really. We don't know a lot about those critters. And when I say critters, I mean the microbes, the fungi, the bacteria, even the virus, a lot of which reside in what we call the rhizosphere, so that area around the roots of the plant. So we understand, what certain practices, management practices in the soil, how we build our soil can influence grapevine growth and performance. And we're now learning about resiliency. But one of the key aspects we haven't had the technology to really understand is what are all those living things in the soil? What's the interplay there with grape root to that microbe? And taking that class last semester really opened my eyes up to soil is a living thing,
right?
And you may have heard the old saying. It was from a farmers group, I believe, up north, and they said there's more life teeming in a teaspoon of soil than there are humans on Earth, and that's thanks to all those bacteria and fungi, and a lot of them are not pathogenic. They're either not hurting the vine at all and not really doing anything, or they are in symbiosis with the vine and actually helping that mother vine resist drought or making nutrients more available that were bound in the soil. And so it's not just, hey, do I have good soil drainage? Am I watering appropriately? It's, how am I protecting and encouraging diversity of plant microbes? And the science, again, is very young in that. And, there's a lot of gimmicks out there, but we're becoming more, really deep diving into this subject and hopefully through research-based, avenues like extension, hopefully provide real solutions for growers going, you are using this product, or yes, adding compost can be a great benefit because it may contain some microbes, but more importantly, it contains food for microbes. Carbon is one thing, but also those nutrients that can be unlocked, used by them, but also our vines. So that's a whole nother aspect of soil that traditionally hasn't been taught. We still don't know a lot, but we know there's a huge connection there.
Oh yeah.
And so it's really exciting. I've started this class myself, this journey, that there is a lot to the soil. I mean, and talking about soil, you're just scratching the surface of it. There is so much about the soil that we have to learn and study about, because example, when you want to start your own vineyard, you got to do the perk test. And then once you've done that, then you got to grab the soil and you send it off to the test. Yeah. And then, but then you've done all that. Then you got to figure out, okay, now what kind of plants can you plant in that soil? What kind of vines can you do? Because you need something that is resistant to diseases. Right. And do you need a rootstocks? One thing is what you're kind of getting at, I think, too, is because you've got the soil and Texas soil. We've got some very fertile soils. Even fertile soils can be a challenge with grapevines because they're very opportunistic. The more It's just like me. If you give me candy at Halloween, I'm going to eat it until you stop giving it to me.
Well, you give it to Erica, she'll never gain weight, so you don't have to worry about that one.
My kids hid their candy from me, and I ate it.
I'm not complaining about getting candy, but the analogy is grapevines are the same way. They will not stop eating if they are presented with food, which is going to be really the ability to photosynthesize.
That big word.
Big word for an Aggie there. Sorry, photosynthesize. Make energy by sunlight. So canopy is important, but also being able to bring up water and nutrients. And so that's just one small aspect there. But of course, we do have events in Texas that can stop or slow growth. It could even kill our vines. And so we've got soil, we talked about texture and chemistry. There's structure as well. And so all these different soils tend to have different structures, and that plays with how deep the roots can penetrate and how they grow. You talked about percolation test, which is great. So internal drainage. So we've got the foundation there. So all of us, if we're going to garden and grow anything, really need to, even if it's just a simple soil test, and put your hand in the soil and feel it, kind of have an understanding about soil. But especially if you're going to try to make money at this and have a vineyard that outlives you, then you really need to focus on that soil. And we've got lots of resources on that with Extension. But moving onward and upward, I think is the goal here.
Yes, it is.
Will mentioned diseases. And so we have soil-borne diseases. So there's plenty of things. We all are familiar with phylloxera because that was something that our famous and beloved TV Munson was helping solve when we graciously, I guess, bequeathed Europe with the phylloxera. So we've got that in most, if not all, of our soils in Texas. Some rootstocks are better buffered against that pest, but then we've got those textural, structural, chemical differences in soil, which some rootstocks are better protect or allow more opportunity for the vine to succeed. But then we move upward into the canopy where we got the magic happening in the soil, but what we see mostly is what's happening above ground. And there's, a whole nother book that is written on that. But we've got a lot of challenges, not just with the soil, but let's move to canopy. And pretty much everything in Texas wants our fruit, not just us, right?
Oh, yeah.
Birds, raccoons,
deer,
everything,
hogs,
possums,
right?
bugs.
Hogs at least want the roots. Yeah, bugs, disease. And you go, well, what sets us apart, from California, or what even sets us apart from the High Plains versus North Texas or East Texas? And there's an interplay. Everything's related to some degree, but it has, when we start talking about disease, unfortunately, in North Texas, we have over a dozen things that are biotic in nature that want to get our grapes, at least, right? And I'm saying a dozen just of the diseases, not including the insects or the vertebrates. And so there's way more in total. But we've got things like Pierce's disease, and we've got black rot and downy mildew and powdery mildew and phomopsis and anthracnose. And those are just the normal ones. And then we get some weird stuff every once in a while. And so, variety plays a huge role. Some varieties are more or less tolerant or resistant to these pathogens. So Pierce's disease, almost every grape variety known to man is susceptible to Pierce's disease. There are a few that have been bred over many years, like some of the stuff TV Munson bred way back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, which we love. So Lamonto, Champanelle. There are others that have a place in our industry, but the challenge there is marketability. No one really knows those grapes, and so that's the crux there. But then we've got other varieties like Black Spanish, Blanc du Bois, which Blanc du Bois hails from Florida, was bred by a Texan.
I just found that out recently too.
Giddy up.
I didn't realize that was a genetically created grape.
It was through natural plant breeding, but yeah, it was a man-made cross, and it is, in my opinion, one of the greatest white hybrids, especially for the South. And it can get Pierce's disease, but it will survive.
Right.
And so, that's a big benefit there. So,
and Michael, just real quick for our listeners who don't know what Pearson's disease is, what is
the
that?
dreaded PD? So I am humbled by by the support y'all have given me. My head is so big right now because you've talked me up. But, I haven't even been in extension more than 7 years now. And so I'm so thankful for my colleagues and my mentors. I want to shout out to Dr. Justin Shiner. Y'all need to interview him.
Okay.
He's pretty much the de facto leader of our team in the state. He has a problem, though. He doesn't know how to say no.
Oh.
And so people ask him, he is a busy man, and he loves to support our industry through programs and just sitting down and talking about Texas grapes and wine. And I've learned so much from him. But talking about Pierce's disease, there's been a lot of work done in Texas on Pierce's disease because it is our number one limiting factor. It's the big boy in the room that you need to be aware of if you're going to grow a grapevine in the backyard or commercially. Unfortunately, almost all of our grapes we can buy both at the box stores or even online commercially are susceptible. It's a bacterial infection. It is fatal to susceptible varieties, and it's spread by a vector, an insect. And so the bacteria itself can't just move by wind and land from grapevine to grapevine. It has to be transmitted. And unfortunately for Texas, we have a ton of great vectors. The main ones are the sharpshooters, and they're xylem feeders, so they feed on the water pipes. And can you imagine trying to get all your sustenance from feeding on water pipes? That's not phloem. So the phloem pipes in grapes are the sugar pipes. So they're feeding on the water pipes, which has only a very small amount of sugar. So what that means realistically or practically is they have to feed constantly. So they're bebopping from this species of plant to this species of plant, and they love grapevines. They unknowingly are injecting that bacteria if it's within its gut, and that bacteria colonizes that grapevine's water pipes. There's some other physiological processes happening, but eventually the vine will die from Pierce's disease. And the cost of the vine itself is not incredibly taxing as monetarily, but it's the loss of production
Potential
and
fruit.
replanting. And so how long does it take to bring a grapevine into bearing typically? What would y'all say? How many years?
For production, it's 3 to 4.
About 3 to 4. Hybrids, maybe 2 to 3. But so around 3. And how long typically, this won't be as scientific. This is more anecdotal. And we have colleagues that focus a lot more on PD. But, if you plant a new vineyard and it's a susceptible variety and you're not doing the basic management, or maybe you are and you're just in such a high pressure area, how long do you think it'll take before you start seeing at least some symptoms in some vines?
This scares me, but I'm going to say a year.
It can be that. It can be 2, 3, 4 years, maybe 5 years. So within that time, very short, very early. And so you're putting all this money in investing upfront capital, which y'all know there's not a lot of money to be made in growing grapes. It's if you're vertically integrated. Even then it can be challenging in our environment. And so there's a lot of money, marriages are on the line, right? And so you plant these grapes, they get Pierce's disease, game over, right? And usually it's before you even get your first crop.
Wow.
Maybe your first couple crops. And so there's no cure for it. There's some technology coming down the pipeline, some organic bacteriophage options from one of our own virologists at A&M. Andy Walker, Dr. Walker at UC Davis, bred some new European varieties, which Will is going to be planting at Grayson College next week, I believe. We hand-delivered some to Andy Allen. And so we've got trials for those all over the state with A&M. We're excited to learn more about their performance and how we actually can grow these things well and make fantastic wine. We've got some of the older hybrids of TV Munson and other breeders in Arkansas and Florida and other places too. So, but Pierce's disease is the big deal. So if you want to have long-lived vines, you want to pay attention to Pierce's disease. One of my colleagues was part of the Pierce's disease management guide, which is on our website. So we've got a lot of great resources, but you do not want to overlook that.
Right.
So pretty much for about 3/4 of the state, Pierce's disease is at least on your radar to some degree, but for about 2/3 of us, it's a major, major issue. If we don't plant tolerant varieties or resistant varieties, it's going to be an uphill battle that is you're more likely to lose than succeed, and it's not even because of your own fault. So
when you said there's no cure for it, even you just have to be very heads up and make sure you're planting the proper varietals.
If you think about it, you go, well, there's not much we can do. There's some research on rootstocks and exclusion of the bacteria, but you go, how can we even approach this problem? Well, it's vectored by an insect. So what do? Try to keep the insect out of the vineyard. The problem is there are numerous vectors. Some are easy to keep out of the vineyard. The one that we have the most problem with is the glassy wing sharpshooter.
Yep.
It's in Napa. There's different species, but that one's a strong flyer. It can survive our winters. Pierce's disease ebbs and flows. This is a challenge too because it's not on your radar every year, but it will be one year out of 10. It may be really high pressure, depending on maybe even every year. But that's another challenge, is not just the pathogen itself and the vector, but the fact that you don't see symptoms typically right away, and that some years there's no pressure, some years there's tons. But in a nutshell, there's some management we can do. We can try to keep that sharpshooter out of the vineyard and other vectors through a dripping of a systemic insecticide that pretty much deters the insect from feeding.
Right.
We can have good management. If we see a vine with symptoms, there's visual symptoms. A&M has a lab that can test for that. We say it's positive, you pull it out immediately because that's the source, right?
Yep.
Try not to plant your hybrids, which can harbor the disease. It won't die from it, Blanc du Bois, Black Spanish, Lamanto, whatever. And not plant those right next to your vinifera. Andy Walkers now are going to be treated as technically as hybrids because they're Pierce's disease resistant.
Okay.
And so we want to be very careful with that, although we're not sure yet if the titer's high enough for spread. But the point is there's a number of cultural things and even chemical things we can do, but it's not guaranteed. It's not like if you do this every year, no matter what, you won't get disease.
Yeah, well, that's I mean, like any other disease, not just
hard.
Plants, but even with humans,
And the thing is, there's a number of other diseases, but typically
that's our killer.
They won't kill the vine outright. Now, what they can do though is they can stress that mother vine out enough to where she's weak, and if we didn't have other stressors, we'd probably still be okay. But in Texas, not only do we have soil-borne issues, general soil issues, we've got climate.
Yep.
And it's not, people just think about the heat, but it's the cold too.
Yeah, especially up here.
And it's not just the lowest cold value of the year, Winter Storm Uri, -16 for Dallas, some people colder. It's the, grapevines are tough, but they're also sensitive. And grapevines are smart, and they're not in some ways, and from our perspective. And what I mean by that is with climate especially, grapevines respond somewhat slowly to some stimuli and faster to others. And if you have a grapevine that's trying to go to sleep, okay, it goes to sleep, but then the grapes don't have incredible chilling hours like some of our fruit trees that until they get, 1,000 hours, 45 degrees, then they're not going to wake up. Grapevines, if you dangle a carrot over them and say it's springtime, they're going to want to wake up. And so what happens though in our wintertime, do we get consistent temperatures like they do in California where it's 60 degrees?
Unpredictable.
It is bipolar here.
It is. So I say, and some of my colleagues don't appreciate this, but I say it because it makes sense. Mother Nature is very schizophrenic in Texas. And I think it's because we're in the middle of the U.S. and we've got those, remember we talked about, the general characteristics of the dry and arid Southwest and the hot and humid Northeast. Mm-hmm. So Mother Nature really doesn't know what to do with us. And she's throwing curveballs each and every way. So our inconsistent temperatures, not just in the fall time, but the winter time and in the extreme heat is a big problem. And so those are other challenges. And then you've got other weather events like hail, tornadoes, hurricanes, wind. Mm-hmm. It just adds up. So I always ask myself, because I teach a lot of prospective growers, like, why are y'all wanting to do this?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Now, I can answer that because I do it myself, and there is great reward and satisfaction in doing it, but you don't want to jeopardize your marriage or your bank account, and so you don't want to go bankrupt, and so you want to do your due diligence. And we had talked about, soil already and variety to some degree, but trellis, I know trellis was a talking point.
Yeah.
And so every decision you make about putting a grapevine in your backyard or on a commercial scale is going to influence the ability of that mother vine to produce a beautiful, heavy, or normal, at least normal crop. We like it to be heavy, great quality, but not just this year, but as long as possible, year after year after year. That's kind of the definition of sustainable while being profitable. I mean, no one's in the wine industry long term just to lose money. So maybe some growers out there do just want to break even. This is their hobby retirement, but most want to make at least some profit because they got a family to feed. And so these all kind of interplay, and trellis is just as important as many other management decisions that you make both before planting and after planting. And so certain varieties are best grown on certain trellises based on the inherent vigor. So the availability of water and nutrients in the soil, how big the grapevine grows. There's different trellis designs you may want to utilize. And sometimes there's no wrong answer for certain things. Sometimes there's a clear, you need to grow your grapevine on this trellis if you want to minimize things like sunburn, or on the other hand, you want to have enough room for that grapevine to grow. Right. So you don't have as densely shaded of a canopy, which if you ever go to Napa and you look at those beautiful vines, and they are gorgeous. Those rows are narrow. They have a vine every 2 feet. They have a 1 foot cordon on each side. They're holding 4 clusters. They're teeny. They're mini vines. You come to Texas, everything's bigger here. And
wait a
one
minute.
vine.
Hold on. Wait a minute. I'm going to back up. You said mini vines, huh?
Mini vines.
Is that kind of like minivan? But
yeah. They're mini vines. I mean, they're baby, but they're mature. But in my view, they're teeny little things.
Now, how big are those clusters, though? I mean,
they can be fairly large. Now, I am giving an extreme example because they do have, even in Napa, some pretty big production. You'll see quads or essentially 4 arms. And those will be heavily loaded. But in general, you look and you go, well, man, Napa's considered one of the greatest wine regions in the world, and it's got great weather, soil typically. They have challenges. But when you come to Texas, and a lot of our soils have a lot of nutrients, a lot of water, we get rainfall during the growing season, we have one of the biggest blessings, and I know I'm bebopping, but one of the biggest blessings about Texas is that we have a long growing season. Wow. So Minnesota, I was up there last year. They have a 3-month growing window.
In and out.
So they have to grow really quickly ripening varieties.
Wow.
California, it's moderate, but Texas, we're done harvesting in North Texas in August. So we've got September, October, and most of November, where Mother Vine is taking a spa day because she's got no kids. They're gone. And she's trying to build herself up and get ready for next year. So that is a blessing for us. And so trellis, though, a lot of different trellises, and that's one component, trying to make sure Mother Vine has enough room, but not too much, a way to improve sunlight into the canopy, but not too much because we can get sunburn in Texas. I always like to make the analogy of if, I don't go topless outside. I always have a Columbia shirt on. And if you were to take me and in the middle of summer take my shirt off, and it'll blind you, but I'd get sunburned instantly because my skin is not tan there. It is here.
Right.
And the same concept's true for grapes. So if you have a cluster of fruit and it's been in the deepest part of the shade because your canopy management wasn't on point, or you didn't have the right trellis installed and it was not enough room to spread that vine out, and the architecture wasn't built in such a way that you maximize sunlight, and then you decide to open that canopy up with leaf pulling or shoot thinning, that cluster is going to fry. And so there's a lot of things that interplay also just within trellis and canopy management. So we've got, again, tons of great information. We've figured out a lot of things through trial and error with these growers who are pioneered and in some way, here with research and academia. But there's still a lot of things that we haven't answered. And so, we're here at Square Cloud, and Jackson's got a unique trellis. He's experimenting with lots of different varieties. And sometimes trellis doesn't maybe matter as much on one site, but in another site, it's everything. It's the biggest thing. So, it's very difficult to kind of dissect and generalize and go, well, you really should have this trellis in all cases. That's not what trellises are all about, or even best practices for management. But trellis does play a huge role in, again, that dappled sunlight, good airflow, because most of our diseases are fueled by dark, humid, comfortable conditions. And so if we can minimize that without overexposure and burn, then we can reduce our pesticides, which no grape grower wants to spray pesticides, organic or conventional.
Right.
They cost money, it takes time. Who wants to be on a tractor suited up spraying something, no matter what it is?
Right.
And so at A&M and other universities too across the states, we teach IPM, or integrated pest management. Certainly in Texas, some varieties require even conventional fungicide sprays, at least on occasion. In higher rainfall areas, higher vigor areas like East Texas, North Texas, we may have to spray a dozen times a year in a really wet year. And that's, no one wants to do it. But that's kind of the trade-off for growing a European grape that is susceptible to everything.
Right.
So, one of the things I have noticed is some of the vineyards that they're on dirt roads and they get that clay dust.
Yeah.
Now, I have seen, and I quote me if I'm completely wrong on this, but I've seen sometimes that clay dust actually protects them almost better than spraying with some sort of pesticide or some sort of.
Yeah. So there's a number of things. So that's one of the great things about adopting an IPM strategy as opposed to let's nuke the heck out of everything. Not only is that going to cost you more money, but you're going to get resistance development probably to that, just like in human health. But you're right. So there are a number of things we can do to reduce the incidence of disease. So good canopy management, the right trellis, managing a healthy soil. And so what you mentioned, dust, and that's a catch-22. And when I was in California, this was a major concern, especially in Pinot Noir. In some cases, that dust can actually carry in spider mites. And you don't see it all the time, but y'all mentioned you were at another vineyard in North Texas, and they have that challenge. And it's not ubiquitously found everywhere, but sometimes that can be a problem. On the other hand, though, that clay can help kind of coat those leaves. And what we can see there, and I just did a little Facebook video on that for our gardeners and grape growers in Texas. It can have an influence on disease, and especially insects, because if you have a cluster coated in clay, it's harder for them to find those and know what they're sitting on. And you can obviously you couldn't rely on that dust coating every nook and cranny on every vine.
Right.
So there's a product that I'm a big proponent of, and that's called kaolin clay. And you may have heard of it. It's essentially the same thing. It's a very fine neutral clay, and it's white, and you can buy it. There is a trade name, and I don't recommend one brand over another, but there's not many out there. But if you're interested, look up Surround WP.
Okay.
That's kaolin clay. And what you're doing is you're coating the leaves and the stems and the fruit with clay. Now, it can be costly. I don't recommend it in every case, in every vineyard, or even every year. But what it can help with, especially in this year and last year with this extreme heat, it can reduce the amount of sunlight penetration and that burning that even in the best managed canopy we may see, just because it's been so dang hot,
right,
and no cloud cover day after day after day. So there's a lot of things we can do, not just chemically but culturally, to reduce chemicals or improve their efficacy, but also maybe reduce the amount of chemicals we have to apply. And certainly economically, we want to be on the lookout there for those. So that's a big influence. That's a big area of interest for us.
So, and we talk about all this weather and protection and sunburning and everything about these vines and stuff. But, the biggest thing that we have to hurdle here in Texas is Mother Nature. Right. She is not and I'm not even going to say the word, she's not forgiving.
No.
Okay.
She's schizophrenic.
Yes.
I stole that from Michael.
One tough cookie.
I mean, like when we down in the hill country, in fact, actually, when we went down there for the one weekend, they had a hailstorm that they were not ready for, and they couldn't pull out their nettings for it. And a lot of them lost their crop because of it. And so, weather plays a big factor, whether you can get black rot on the vines when it's too wet, or you can get sunburn, which cracks me up. A grapevine gets sunburn, to say that, so it's amazing what even just the weather plays in that factor out there.
Plays a huge role. I mean, again, a lot in every way, because too little or too much rain affects what's going on in the soil, and that's going to ultimately affect vigor and the health of the vine. Too little or too much rain can spur or not spur disease or encourage disease. And that's one of the reasons that we have large acreage in the high plains, not only because it's an ag community, but it's more arid. Now, my Lubbock colleagues and friends may not appreciate this, but as you can tell, I'm not afraid to tell a joke at others' expense, including my own. But, when I teach master gardeners or new grape growers, I always joke and I say, because a lot of them are in North Texas, and they go, why can't we grow European grapes as easily as California or even Lubbock? And I go, well, no one wants to live in Lubbock, not even the insects or the fungus, right? Because there's nothing there. There's no grass. There is one tree in Lubbock I found, but it was one of those fake trees that's a cell phone tower that's got fake branches on it.
Right.
So it's very cold, in the wintertime. It's arid during the growing season. And so that is very good for growing as long as you have clean, high-quality water. That's a challenge for them. Drift is another challenge of certain herbicides. But
we won't talk about drifts.
We won't talk about that right now. When you say weather, you're right. Every type of weather, component can have an influence, negative or positive. And then you mentioned hail, and so we talked about precipitation as a big player in disease potential, grapevine stress, being able to feed those children, throughout the entire heat of the summer. But then also you can talk about those whims of Mother Nature with hail and wind. Unfortunately, one of my favorite grape growers and winemakers in North Texas, they had a tornado blow through, and they've had it happen before, and they lost a lot of their trellis and grapevines, and that was devastating. When Hurricane Harvey caused a lot of damage, not only structurally, but also all that rain down in the Gulf Coast essentially decimated the Blanc du Bois that was hanging there. Winter Storm Uri, once in 500-year event, we're still recovering from the after effects of that up here in North Texas. And so, hail you had talked about. Now, here's one of the exciting things is in all the things we can control as humans, right? Disease, soil, nutrition, all those components, but we have some influence over. We have very little influence over major weather events. We can't tell Mother Nature to not hail or rain or not rain, okay? But what we're seeing is innovation and new technologies. Hail netting is a great example because hail netting was not used in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And we weren't even looking at it at the university level. I mean, they certainly have been in other more developed industries, but it was, kind of pioneering with the growers in the high plains who are going, we get hailed out every single year. We cannot afford this. Right. And yes, hail netting costs a lot of money. It's a pain in the butt to put out. But through innovation, through testing, through trialing, we're now seeing that being widely adopted. And now the university has been doing research to confirm the success and the economic viability and helping promote that. And so we're seeing that, but climate change, whatever your thoughts are on that, is a new focus for research, both in breeding of new varieties like the Walker varieties, new technologies, utilizing kaolin clay perhaps a little more frequently. My PhD work's working on fine-tuning irrigation for optimization, which we haven't surprisingly had really any peer-reviewed research done in Texas, which is something we're desperately needing. Soil sensor technology, pretty much being data-driven, really looking things throughout. What can we do? And then those new things. I was in California. My colleague Dr. Shiner was in Washington State just a couple months ago, and even in the valley there, up in the valley up in Washington, seeing new technologies. It was funny because it's such a foreign concept for us. But one example is one of my good friends in the valley with this hurricane coming up Baja California. They were putting plastic over the grapevines because they didn't want rain, because that was table grapes. And they don't want the rain to split and crack the fruit or cause powdery mildew, downy mildew. Whereas in Texas, we're like, holy smokes, we've been so hot. We would take rain even if there was an increase in disease potential. Right. And so looking at that, and then in Washington, looking at mylar reflective plastic being put underneath the trellis to reflect sun up into the canopy.
That's a good
to
idea.
Color the apples better. And then you've got overhead protection from the extreme sun and their hail issues or whatever else they've got. So we're seeing innovation in all forms. And what's another thing? Technology with AI and mapping and precision viticulture we talked about a touch last time. So, agriculture is not static. We're not just stuck with what we've got. It may take a long time, but, through trial and error and new technologies, hopefully that will help us ensure our vines are more resilient so that we have a wine industry that's successful for many, many, many years.
Wow.
So anyways, that's just a snapshot.
That was amazing. I feel like I've been very educated.
Well, Michael, your hair looks like it's going to pop like a pimple.
My gosh.
Mine is too. I'm ready for a nap.
Well, I have really just one question out of that, and that is just of all the things you just described in such great detail, what is it in your opinion is that number one thing that us up here in North Texas or even in Texas in general, what is the one thing we have to watch out for? You're a new entrepreneur wants to start this venture. What is that one thing they really just have to absolutely be heads up on?
Well, the heads up is you can't be attached to money. You gotta no. The main thing in North Texas is you gotta be aware of Pierce's disease, and you have to be. If you're going to take that risk of growing Europeans, obviously you want to pick a variety that's better adapted to the heat, lower risk. But Pierce's disease was the number one issue, and it still is.
Okay.
Now, if we take that away, and we've dealt with that, and we're gonna manage for that, we're being very careful. We're still gonna, maybe plant some hybrids or something, but we're gonna put a little European in. Of course, there's so many other things to keep in mind, but I would say long-term sustainability, we have to be looking at how can we protect our grapevines, even at the expense of doing something a little differently, investing more in chemicals or in cultural practices, changing up our plans, because a lot of times we get a plan going, we got it from our neighbor vineyard, and we don't change it, and we don't really think maybe there's as much of an influence that there really is negatively impacting our vines. So kind of refreshing your plan, making sure you're up with current technologies and research. But I would say being mindful of Mother Nature.
Yep.
And we know that Texas has always had a schizophrenic climate, and we've had extremes. We like to be number one in many things, and we probably are one of the number ones in extremes of all kinds, not just cold and heat. And so realizing that that's not something, it seems, and I've been in extension for about 7 or 8 years, but there's colleagues many more years previous, but in the last 5 to 10 years, it seems especially that the frequency of extreme weather events, hail, tornadoes, extreme heat, extreme nighttime temperatures, no rain for so long, extreme cold in the wintertime are getting more frequent. Whatever the reason is, you can call it whatever you want. But as grape growers and winemakers, we need to work together to buffer our mother vines from those stressors. I think the main thing is understanding stress. And I will say this unabashedly as a researcher who has had the opportunity to study and explore many wine regions and who's very proud of our Texas industry. But stress is not something that we want in excess ever. And so a lot of people refer to the work that's been done in California, which I was a part of, where, you want to stress that vine out, not irrigate for a couple weeks before harvest to, quote, concentrate your sugars and, your color and your other phenolic compounds, aromatics. Well, the stress level in California is a totally different stress than what we have here.
Yes.
And so I like to describe it like this. I'm a PhD student, so I take classes. We've all taken classes. The stress in California would be the equivalent of me taking one graduate level class. Yeah, it's stressful. And I have an exam I've got to study for. The stress we have in Texas is like taking 10 graduate level classes.
And working a part-time job.
And keeping a part-time job. And so it's a constant level of high stress. And that's why I have no hair and am very overweight.
Well, you got more hair than I do.
Well, yeah. So you've been in Texas longer than I have. So, but the point is that certainly there are things we can do to improve quality and maintain quality. We all want high quality fruit, but perhaps that the recommendations from other states may not hold true. But even if you did see a benefit, let's say in stopping watering, maybe in a normal year it may work, but with this heat, let's just say you get better quality from withholding water for 2 weeks before harvest in a warm year in Texas or a hot year. Okay, that's great, but does that have an effect on the resiliency and the long-term sustainability of that mother vine? Have you weakened that mother vine and reduced the lifespan or the amount of future high quality harvest you've got? And some people would say, to me, that doesn't matter. I'm just going to replant. That's fine. But I think most of us want to find a balance where you have the best quality you can year after year. And you want that, not just 1 out of 10 years, but every single year. And so again, research, pioneering with our growers, trying to find solutions to that is really the overarching way we're going to deal with climate change and the whims of Mother Nature, is reducing that inherently high stress, whether it's from hail damage or from heat, and trying to protect those vines. Unfortunately, what that means for grape growers overall is that there's probably going to be quite a bit more investment up front, at least, in new technologies like hail netting than there have previously been. However, if you're in it for the long term, that will pay out and you'll be in much better shape. And so that's what I would say. That
initial investment is huge. And that's just like anything in life. You have to invest in it knowing that in the next 10 to 15 years, it'll pay off.
One, it's easy to say, oh yeah, dump in $60,000 an acre and you're not going to see a return on investment for 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to accept that.
Yeah,
that's hard.
You had to come to that conclusion. You're like,
ouch.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to suck this up for just a little bit.
Like Michael said, though, if you're in, both feet are in. You're gonna burn the ships. It's done. You are in. Then you have to make that investment.
Well, and the great thing is, I've got great colleagues, but the real heroes are our grape growers who've been doing this a long time. Yeah. And our Texas wine industry, one of the greatest things, and y'all know this because you've talked to so many, is that it is a very open, friendly environment where people want to learn together. And we all have our opinions, and some are more opinionated than others, but that's okay.
That's all learn. Sure on that one.
Awesome.
Well, Michael, I'm sitting here, I was going to school right now. And I'm trying to absorb as much as possible here. And obviously when I sit down and I'm going to edit this also, I'm going to be listening to it again. And the question, no, it's fine. It's great that you had this information. You could tell the passion in your voice and the way you're explaining all this. And I wish we had more time. I mean, we could do a month or two. Thank you, ma'am. But we can sit here for another 4 or 5 episodes just talking about this. And it's just amazing what Texas has done and come such a long ways in just grape growing and making wine.
Absolutely. And we are building upon the shoulders of those that had practically no chance. People would have laughed them off the stage in the 80s, even before with Valverde in the late 1800s, going, what the heck are you doing growing grapes in Texas? And building upon their shoulders and not forgetting their stories and making our own and going forward.
Yeah, it's all important for sure. So, we appreciate it, Michael, so much, and we're very grateful. And I know that one of the ways we wrap up our episodes is we do a takeaway, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But we are really grateful. I agree with Will 100% that we could probably do 10 more episodes, and with your permission, we would love to do those episodes. So maybe not today.
Yeah,
but
I will say this: I do know one of the things that we want to plan on in the future is do have a really nice. And I don't want to go like completely in depth, but a good in depth. I mean, I know I just contradicted myself there. Education. And we want to provide that for the people who do want to understand more about this
Our
stuff.
Users.
Our users. Did I say listeners or users?
No, you said listeners. That's okay.
Well,
little inside joke.
We're all using y'all's beautiful and wonderful, interviews and learning from those. So.
Sure.
Well, we're grateful. But let's do takeaways real quick. And again, Michael, we're so grateful. And I can see why people respect you and admire you and reach out to you because you're just a really valued source of information. Very well educated. Just say thank you, Michael. No, I'm joking. I can tell you are very, very valued.
Yeah,
I value.
You can definitely see that.
So, Will, real quick, maybe we've just had, we've done 2 parts of this episode, and it's going to be next week and the following week. But what is a takeaway? And overall, do you have a takeaway? Is it possible to bring one takeaway?
It's just like you said, it's impossible to have one takeaway because every little thing in Texas, from the soil, from the diseases, from the insects to the mother vine. I love that word, mother vine. I'm gonna start using that one. And then building the trellis and from the weather and from watering and stuff like that. Yeah. Don't get a big head over there, Mom. But I mean, it's amazing that if one thing is incorrect, you could lose everything instantly.
Gotta be heads up, well educated. And then Erica Lynn, thanks for being here as well, running the equipment today. But maybe a takeaway from you?
Well, first of all, I expected you to be 60 years old. That the amount of feedback people have given us about you has been phenomenal. So the fact that you are so full of passion and energy and youthful is incredibly exciting for what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, way more youthful than we thought.
But the other thing is, I can tell.
You're still doing really good.
With a lot of hair. The other thing I'm really excited about is I can tell you're a phenomenal teacher because you ask questions, you provide some time for somebody to answer, and then you explain it. And so just even sitting here, I could see your students in your classes, the people that you're working with, engaged and excited about how can I take the information you're giving me to make my education and or my vineyard better than it is today.
You know what they say, when you found your vocation and passion, it's not work.
That's right.
Exactly.
In Extension, we work way more than we're allowed to. I'll say that. Or than we're supposed to, but we do it out of love. And the industry does the same for us. And so I want to thank y'all for dedicating your Sunday to learn more about me and for us to also learn more about each other and then share that with your listeners and then the industry at large.
Well, we've been excited to share you with our listeners worldwide. And I think it's exciting. I bet we're going to have a lot of feedback from folks saying, get him back on the episodes because it's going to be very important.
I'll be here in a heartbeat.
Well, my takeaway is I wanted kind of a funny one, and that is that you're the opposite of the teacher in Ferris Bueller, who's Bueller. And so I want to just point that out, that you are the opposite of that spectrum. Thank you for that, for sure.
I have my own faults. One of those is talking too much. But
well,
hey, why do you think I started this podcast?
There you go. But my real takeaway is really just the naivety of me coming into a world of just this beautiful thing. We're kind of some great winemakers over here, which is great. But even just understanding, my first thought when I said, let's do a podcast, Will, is listen, I want to research. I want to be so equipped for success. And so I researched Pierce's disease. And just today, I understand I knew about 3% of what I really needed to know. That's true. And I'm a researcher. We're researchers. And so we like that. So thank you for that. That's really just awesome.
Did you just call me
it's
a nerd?
Elaborate. No, we're both kind of nerdy when it comes to that. But we're grateful for that for sure. And so we're excited, guys. We're going to do more podcasts with this amazing young gentleman. And we're just excited about that. Listen, I feel I finish every episode with a couple quotes. Are you guys ready for them?
Yes.
They're appropriate today because of the gentleman we're at. But the first one's from Salvador Dali. And it's, the connoisseur does not drink wine, but tastes of its secrets. Yes. And the last one's from the great Galileo. Wine is sunshine held together by water.
Amen.
So that's good. So we are blessed to be here at Square Cloud Winery. Thank you for that opportunity.
Yes, thanks for Jackson
interview.
For allowing us out here.
And then, of course, with Michael Cook, we've been very excited about this for months, probably, to connect with you. So on behalf of We Know Texas Vino here in Gunter, Texas, this is Michael.
It's Will.
And this is Erica.
Adios.
Cheers.